Good evening. My name is Arlene Miller, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this edition of Our Town. We're doing this special taping today on very short notice to the town manager, and I want to thank him very much for taking time to do this. This meeting will be dedicated to a review of the articles that will be before the town at the special town meeting on November 3rd, which is only about 8 days from today when we're doing the taping. So we've decided that since this is very important stuff that you'll be voting on, that we should promote this meeting and that we should review the articles. So thank you, Stephen Crane, for coming in. And so just to review, a special town meeting is customarily held in this town to augment and supplement articles that were voted on at the annual town meeting in May, but also to deal with issues that come up subsequent to that town meeting in May, correct?
That's correct, and sometimes we've proposed bylaw changes during a special town meeting. I think in years past, the special town meeting was needed when the professional management of the town was less robust, but now I think it's more of a secondary meeting, a second opportunity to interact with the legislative branch for things that, that basically would make the annual town meeting much longer. I mean, there are communities that have annual town meetings that run days.
Right.
And
right.
Long Meadow, from what I've perceived, is a community that prefers to have
definitely
a one-night annual town meeting, which then puts some business that may be outside the traditional scope of a special town meeting back on a special town meeting warrant because there just simply isn't time to get to it at the annual town meeting.
But not only that, in addition, at the time of the annual town meeting, when you're preparing your warrant for that in February, March, you don't necessarily know all the financial, the revenues and the expenses, and so you go to that meeting with a little bit less information. Yes. This meeting you have more information, and if the selectmen need to set a tax rate, and they don't typically do that until after this information has been voted on, contemplated and voted on.
Yeah, a number of the first, I think, 8 articles really reflect changes in revenue and free cash projections that were unknown during the budgetary process, and they're all the articles that are kind of financial cleanup articles, if you will, are all relatively minor, but those are all really exactly what you say, Arlene, a reflection of new information from either state revenue or local receipts or some other factor that allows these to either raise and appropriate to meet needs that were not projected during the budgeting process despite our best efforts, or needs that have come up since then.
So this meeting, and I neglected to say up front, is November 7th, November 3rd at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
I got the 7 in there. At Long Meadow High School in the auditorium, not in the gym,
Gymnasium,
which is going to be very special because the auditorium is a very special, it's a cozy place. It'll be fun.
My understanding, and this is before my time, but my understanding was that the auditorium was in part designed to have town meeting there. One of the things, we usually give presentations at town meeting. I know people sometimes don't like the PowerPoint presentations, but they are helpful to kind of illustrate what we're trying to say. And we've always struggled in the gymnasium because of the lighting to give presentations that were really visible.
Well, it's a colder environment.
It is, and if you shut off half the lights, you lose half the crowd.
Sure.
So the auditorium, the audio-visual capacity of the auditorium is just well beyond anything in the gymnasium. So our new moderator, Rebecca Townsend, really wanted to kind of try different things with town meeting, and I don't want to use the word experiment, but basically, let's have it in the auditorium and see how that goes.
It'll be our first one.
Yeah, in this auditorium.
That's great. Well, are you going to rise up on the stage?
Smoke from behind, laser show. Yeah, the whole thing.
That's very exciting. All right, let's get back to the warrant. So this warrant has 12 articles on it. 2 of which are bylaw changes, and the rest are financial issues. The biggest one, in my mind, and most complicated, is number 8. So I've asked Stephen if we'd sort of go quickly through the other 11 and then return to 8 so we can spend a little bit more of quality time on that. So why don't we rotate and you can explain. I'll start. The first one,
well, let me do. One of the things we've talked about, we're not going to do it for this meeting, but one of the things the moderator talked about was a concept called a consent agenda, which is you have the kind of minor business items as one package, and so they could be discussed and considered as a group and then voted on as a group. Like I said,
Interesting.
I don't think we're going to do that because it is a somewhat new concept, but these first 7, I believe, articles really fit within that category of, kind of just business housekeeping type things. The amounts of money are relatively low. They're just, like I said, covering minor changes in our budget. So I'll go through them pretty quickly under that regard.
But they do show, I will say, they do show some of the functions of the town, some of the things that we're doing, and some of the reasons we shift monies around, like unemployment, payment, the Greenwood, the daycare program. I mean, all these are vital programs
Yeah, I think
in
like
the community, and these are, I think it's important.
You're right. I mean, I think there are a few of these that, it's not just, bookkeeping. The transfers are real for real purposes, for real government functions. I think the first article one's a good example. And we cut a position from the Greenwood Daycare Center in our FY16 budget because enrollment wasn't there. The center was actually not making money because they couldn't justify the position, and it was costing the revolving fund that funds those positions a deficit. And Parks and Rec Director Barry Jarvis and her team at Greenwood did a remarkable job really turning around the financial performance of the agency. And it really enhanced marketing and really wanted to grow revenues as well as reduce costs. They were so successful, they created a situation where they needed to now add a position back to fill a classroom
At the daycare center.
and generate additional revenue. So it wasn't in our budget, and the school year, or the daycare year, if you will, starts in September. They needed to fill the position, so we needed the resources in hand. So we went to the Finance Committee and asked for a reserve fund request, which they graciously approved.
Okay.
But we had money under our levy, that the budget that was approved in May reflects a projection of what we said was going to be increasing our tax levy 2.5% under the law, in accordance with Prop 2.5. Because of various factors, we're not quite there yet.
Good planning, good management, we didn't have to do
Good
that.
planning, good management, better revenue projections.
You didn't do it just for the sake of doing it, and that's, the taxpayers appreciate that. So this one is asking, I'm going to get to it because we got to keep going, is asking for $28,000 to replenish the Finance Committee's reserve fund, which they used in an emergency, because they had to, a timing basis, fund this in September.
Yes.
So and this is recommended by the Finance Committee.
I think the Finance Committee recommended all the articles.
Right.
So for shorthand, when people are looking at this, when it says raise and appropriate, that means within additional property taxes under our tax levy.
Right.
But
within the tax levy, just raising it a little bit more.
What we said we were going to levy the taxpayers in May is still going to be what we levy the taxpayers. It's just we have more room.
Because you didn't do it all in May.
In May.
You didn't use up all
the certain revenues have come in better than expected.
Good.
So
that's just good news.
So the tax, we're not really expanding the levy that we proposed in May. It's just internally things have shifted around. So I want to make sure it's clear. But if you're looking at your warrant, wherever it says raise and appropriate, and it's a very small amount of money when you add it up, that is
still money.
Property tax, it's still money. And then when it says to
transfer from available.
Yeah, to appropriate from available funds in the Treasury, that's generally what we call free cash, which is
a bank account.
Our savings account, if you will, and where free cash comes from in a given budget year is we make conservative assumptions, and then we do everything we can to create efficiencies and reduce expenditures during the year.
And spend less than those assumptions.
And sometimes revenues come in higher than assumptions, and since we do a good job cost controlling, we don't end up spending that money. Now, I think the people could always say, well, why don't you just lower your budget amounts by what you came in at? Well, you're trying to guess ahead.
Yeah, no, too much.
Yeah, so
let's keep going.
That's why we do that. So
okay,
go
but
ahead.
just for people's information, are they going to receive this at home, this warrant?
No.
No, this does not, because it's special.
It's on the website.
It's on the website. Hard to find, I will say, but it's on the website. So
I think if you go to the select board page, it has it on there.
okay. All right, so just so people know that. So article number 1 is to transfer $28,000 back to the Finance Committee's reserve fund account because of this extra position at the Greenwood daycare. Good. 2 is to appropriate, raise and appropriate $50,000. I love this one, to reduce our debt service so we can reduce that those payments back sooner. And
We have the extra levy capacity, so and $50,000 is not has no like significance in terms of debt service. It's just we have the capacity. Let's pay a little debt down and improve our financial position.
Great to be in that position.
Right.
So the third one is to appropriate $25,000 for employee benefits and liability insurance. Now that one, why don't you just?
Well, our costs in the benefits line items are trending much higher than projected, and there's a variety of reasons for that.
And one is unemployment costs.
Unemployment, yeah. I mean, I think that unemployment is a big one. A lot of that is driven by the schools.
So if we release an employee and they qualify for unemployment, we pay that for a period of time. So that's a piece of money, and so you're responsible for that for a period of time.
And we've had a lot of turnover. There's been some transition positions, some changing of positions, and so but it is trending much higher.
So it's just getting the house in order, and that's what that's all about.
And hopefully we won't need to spend the money, but we do project and manage conservatively, so we want to make sure we have the money in hand and turn it back to the taxpayers in the form of free cash versus coming in with a deficit and really having a bad situation.
Right. And so the fourth one is for liability insurance account for property and casualty insurance. So what's that?
That is workers' comp primarily.
Oh, okay.
We've had some significant injuries on duty. And so
Fire and police.
Fire and police, and then we've also had some premiums go up in our property and casualty.
Okay, the other one, that 5 is to add $50,000 to employee retirement benefits, and this has to do with, it says health insurance.
Retiree health insurance. Yeah.
Retiree health insurance. Okay.
And that's more, there's, and this is local governments everywhere. There's a lot of retirements because a lot of people, not many.
And we pay a portion of their health insurance throughout their retirement.
Correct.
That's a benefit that they get.
Yes, that's a promise that was made to the retirees, and there's a lot of people here kind of hitting retirement age at the same time.
Yes, yes. It is tempting, isn't it? Something to look forward.
I wish.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah.
I wish I was there.
All right, 6 is easy. That's putting the community preservation funds.
This is a housekeeping item.
This is very housekeeping, into different pockets, and that's by law. The pockets that the community preservation fund can fund are open space, historic preservation, and housing, and this is taking money that the town appropriates and gets and puts.
It has to be allocated for certain functions by statute.
10% of that money goes to each of those pockets, and the rest goes to undesignated money.
But it takes a town meeting vote to do the allocation.
And that's what that's about.
Yep.
That's great. So the next one is, go ahead.
So this is the $9,000 transfer. We had emergency repairs to one of our ambulances.
This is Article 7.
Article 7 that exceeded our maintenance and repair budget. So once again, we asked the Finance Committee for a reserve fund request. And for those who don't know, a reserve fund is an appropriation of general fund money that the Finance Committee gets under their jurisdiction, not the Select Board, not the Town Manager. That is basically
it's an emergency
fund for unforeseen circumstances, and they can approve it and release the funds just in a given meeting. And it was $60,000. They did raise it to $90,000 with a transfer to cover police and fire overtime in the last budget cycle for the town. And we asked them for $9,000. We do have an ambulance fund that is funded by the business of running the ambulance.
Right.
And so they asked that the Select Board felt that it was important to pay back the Finance Committee for the funds.
Great, great. And so we're going to skip over 8 for now. That's the town yard funding. 9 is, does that have to do with the town yard?
No, 9 is $50,000 for a feasibility study or continued
the
assessment of the Council on Aging. Yes.
Okay, so you want to give a 2-second update on where we are in that?
Yeah, this has been going on for more than a year. A citizens petition at I think last year's fall town meeting, or maybe even been last.
It wasn't May. It was before that.
I think it was the previous May's town meeting. 35,000 by a citizen petition to do a feasibility study. We ended up hiring Pioneer Valley Planning Commission for about 10,000 to do a survey and some kind of basic background work on our demographics and kind of look at a few sites. really 10,000 foot level analysis, so not
Right.
really kind of getting into the gradient details.
But then we did some more money later on.
We amended it at the last town meeting, at the annual town meeting, to spend the remaining 25
Oh, that's
on
all.
an
So-
architect and engineer specifically for Turner Park or an expanded and renovated Greenwood, to really drill down those two sites to get us to try and figure out where it could go and what it would cost. We did that, and they did get into the details, but there still really is some question about what is, the really long-term best option for the town. And so we're asking for the select board the select board has endorsed this process as a project. They haven't said we're going to build a new senior center, but what they said is we are taking over this project from this kind of group of citizens, and we are going to push it forward like we do the DPW or any other municipal project.
Sure.
So this is kind of them signifying that they are going to continue this effort, and more site analysis is needed, and then really come up with some more detailed conceptual site plans. Right now we have blocks on maps.
Yeah, no, this is great, this is
Yeah,
great.
so
And I shouldn't have been asking you the detail of that question, because for the citizens to know this, when you look at the warrant on the website, there's a fabulous paragraph under each article with an explanation, which is, Stephen's going into much more detail, which is great, but that history that he just recalled to me is right here, and it's very clear and very, very good. So I would urge everybody, first of all, come to the special town meeting so you can voice your opinion and vote. And before you do that, though, download this explanation of the warrant so you can be educated when you do vote. It'll help you be more comfortable.
And certainly they're welcome to call me if they have any questions about the articles.
Be careful what you ask for. That's great. You heard it right from him. Okay, great. So that's a majority vote. That's nothing special, and that's recommended also by the Finance Committee. And so the next one is to simply get very housekeeping. The selectmen have a position, this is Article 10, have a position that if we have over $500,000 in our free cash account, that any additional money would then be allocated to our operational stabilization fund. And this year, with everything being discussed at town meeting, if everything passes at the end of the day, there'll be about $53,000 that they're asking the town to move into the operational stabilization fund, which is just a special savings account for the town. But it takes 2/3 vote to do that. Yeah. And the reason is because it takes 2/3 vote to take it back out. So this is a really safety net.
It's different than free cash.
It's a safety net.
It's the true reserves of the town.
Yeah, so that's 10. 11, it's all you. Now we get into the bylaws. There's 2 bylaws.
This one is...
This has been before us before.
This is recycled.
Yeah.
There's been the demolition... the Long Meadow Building Demolition Committee, the way it was constructed, we discovered that there's no terms, meaning that people get appointed for life.
So like the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and so it's one of these things where every other board and committee has a 3-year term or a 2-year term or a 1-year term, and what we wanted to do was seek to just make the Long Meadow Building Demolition Committee similar. They've never met, but we wanted to make that at
They've
least...
never met?
No. We wanted to make the existence of the committee similar to what it was.
So they meet as needed.
As needed, and it has not been needed. And a member of the committee felt like, if anybody was there at that last town meeting, did the motion lay on the table, and it seemed like chaos ensued.
Yes.
And people got all kind of, it was quite a moment. I went back and watched it recently.
It was confusing.
It got really confusing.
Very confusing.
So and I really had nothing to do with this, but I think there was some issues between the Historic Commission and the Building Demolition Committee, and so they kind of got together and sorted out language, and that's what is represented here.
So they support this?
Yep.
Great, as it is.
I think.
Yeah, no, we'll find out at the town
We'll
meeting.
find out at town meeting, yeah.
Then the last one is a 2.5 page or whatever long bylaw that we're being asked to adopt. Again, these are majority votes, both of these, 11 and 12. And this is called the Town of Long Meadow Complete Streets Bylaw, which is very interesting to me. I have no idea what this is about.
So this is in transportation planning for many, many years. It was an automobile-centric planning. How you take care of cars in your transportation planning was the overwhelming and sometimes only consideration.
How you move cars from point A to point B.
Move cars from point A to point B, where they park, how much street width they need. If you have too many cars, you need more lanes. This kind of, narrow approach.
So we're going to get rid of our cars?
No. What Complete Streets does is it establishes a bylaw that's in the 2.5 pages is really saying, here are all the things you need to look at in your transportation planning. If you adopt the bylaw, it gives you a more favorable formula for transportation funding at the both state and federal levels.
So this is a state thing?
State and federal, and
Okay.
there's an economic benefit to doing it. I will say Long Meadow does do a good job in our transportation planning at looking at multi-modes, public transportation, bikes, pedestrians, but this really kind of codifies that. And it doesn't require you to put in bus stops, it doesn't require you to put in bike lanes, it just requires that you give them consideration in your transportation planning.
Okay.
And that's something that we should do as a matter of course, and codifying it through the bylaw and putting us in a position to get better transportation dollars in the future is a worthwhile endeavor.
So it doesn't really change our roads, it doesn't really change our sidewalks, it doesn't really change our lights, it just sort of tells us, look at the big picture.
Yeah, you voting yes on this won't change anything immediately other than our approach in terms of planning.
Right.
But there are roads that just simply aren't wide enough for bike lanes, and this is never going to change that.
Right.
And that's but we have to document that through this process.
Okay, all right. So we've covered that. So there's 12 articles. We've discussed 11. The one that I think deserves the most attention, personally, is number 8, and that's asking the town to vote to transfer from the available funds in the Treasury $438,000 and some change for the purpose of continuing the architect and engineering design work for a new Department of Public Works complex. So I know this has been a priority of the Select Board. We've already, according to this, appropriated in former meetings $250,000, and now you're asking us for $438,000 for what?
For continued design work and to do, again, with this project, we are down to, we think, 2 sites that...
Have you shared that?
We have, yeah. I mean, the 2 sites are essentially a section, a corner, if you will, of the Wolf Swamp fields. Really largely where there's a parking area now by the power lines.
Would that require taking down a lot of trees?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And that's a question that would get answered through this next phase of the process. And the other site is a privately owned site, Grand Meadows Tennis Club. And I know that there's a school of thought that says we shouldn't talk publicly about the site, but the community wants to know what we're looking at and how we're planning. And we've kind of gotten to the point where there really just aren't very many parcels of land, privately or publicly owned, that you can fit a site like this, a facility like this. The one parcel that we know it cannot go is Pondside Road, where it currently exists. And the Select Board did make that policy decision about a year ago to not put it back on Pondside Road. And it's the floodplain.
You're planning for global warming, so the river's going to rise.
Well, it's flooded before. That area has flooded before, and as I'm sure as you know, it has some environmental issues, and we've done enough engineering of that site to know that it really is not a sensible place to invest, $10 to $15 million for a building. This project is in need. This needs to be done.
So this is at the end of this spending of this $600-some thousand, we're going to have a recommendation from these people from a site?
We will have a site. We will have the site permitted, or at least all the permitting docs prepared. We will have a very strong, very advanced level of design of the building. And we will know then, with a much greater level of reliability, what it's going to cost to construct. And all the questions, I shouldn't say all of the questions, but most of the questions about why do we need it, what's it going to cost, what's it going to look like, what are we going to have in it, those will all be answered through the planning done in this phase. So when we go to eventually ask the town for the money needed to construct the facility, we will be able to answer people's questions by the information we're going to gather in this phase. And and I know it's a lot of money, and it's going to be an expensive project, but I think we talked about this before. It's been planned since the 1980s.
We've been talking about it.
Since the 1980s.
Definitely. In my tenure on the board, it was several times. We did studies.
I think everyone
couldn't find a spot to put it.
Couldn't find a spot to put it, which means that there are going to be some difficult decisions to be made. And I think the challenge is, when it came to the high school, there was Lancer pride. and there was an organized group of people whose sole purpose, or not sole purpose, but
DPW pride.
yeah, I mean, we don't have a Lancer Pride for that, and so the elected leaders and the other municipal leaders really have to advocate for some tough decisions. But it needs to be done, and what I'm heartened by is I established a task force of residents who either serve on certain boards and committees that would be relevant for this, or they have some experience in construction background, to do two things. One, to offer their expertise in the planning of the project, but also to offer their views of the project as residents and town meeting voters. And the feedback we've gotten through this task force has been really great.
Oh, good.
And what I am heartened by is people really understand that this is needed. And I think the question I ask people is, do you believe Longmeadow is going to be here in 50 years? And if you believe Longmeadow is going to be here in 50 years, then you need to make this investment today. Because right now, it's about $300 a square foot to construct a DPW facility. Weston and Sampson, our design firm, is like the top firm in this region for designing and constructing DPW facilities. They're all trending at about $300 a square foot, which is a jaw-dropping number, but that's what they cost. In 2001, the number was $95 a square foot. In 1988, what do you I mean, the number was obviously substantially lower than that.
Very much so. I think it was 2 million we were talking, maybe 4.
Right. So the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. And if we're going to have this department continuing to provide our water and sewer services and plow our streets and maintain our parks and our facilities for the next 50 years, this facility that they're in is simply not going to allow them to do that in the very near future. And the building is in the floodplain. And if, God forbid, there was a flood,
you'd have to move everything out of there.
it would be destroyed. There'd be no rebuilding. And we would not be allowed to be, under the grandfathering would be gone, and we would not be allowed to rebuild there. How expensive do you think that project would be doing it under duress?
These are very good arguments. You can just wait on these. So, so at the end of the day, though, people are going to have they'll be able to use this to make some information, to make some decisions. What's your timeline? Do you have that? Would you care to share that?
Well, I think we want to get this project, keep the momentum going, show the people that we're taking a very serious approach, that we are hearing feedback, and we are trying to be sensitive to the many different viewpoints about this project, and be as thoughtful as possible, but also demonstrate that even though it's going to be an expensive project, we are driving.
By expensive, you mean 8 to 10 million?
10 million?
You're not talking 90 million.
No, excuse me.
You're not talking school
no.
expensive.
I mean, I would say in the $10 to $15 million range.
You just raised it,
Yeah. No, 10 to 15 million is probably the building. I mean, there's going to be soft costs and contingencies and things like that
you
built
do believe
in.
in prefab, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Butler buildings,
we do. But if you look at what's required for these types of things, it's you can do some prefab, but it's not a Butler. I mean, a Butler building just doesn't have the clear span for storing the vehicles indoors.
Go to Granby.
I think a lot of it's served by size of the fleet.
Yeah.
But like I said, we're meeting with our designers.
Yeah, no.
We significantly, we actually, the task force and our own DPW personnel, we cut off 20% of the recommended building, just right off the top. Which is a 20% drop in the cost of the project.
Well, that's good.
So we are very committed to making the building as efficient and as cost effective as possible.
Do you know what the footprint's going to be, the land?
There are different, again,
I'm way ahead of the game.
Way ahead of the game. It's about a 42,000 square foot project.
Okay. Very interesting, but I'm going to put in a plug that these guys include the recycling center in that.
I believe the recycling center is going to stay where it is.
I think that in the floodplain, just for all the reasons you just said, that's a big mistake. But can I speak to the committee about that sometime, or can the recycle? We'll be on a different meeting to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take up a big footprint, and it's important that it.
The recycling center and the swap shop are extremely important components of our public works.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it here. But I'm just saying it would be a real mistake to leave.
That's one of those
down
things
there.
which is why I'll be urging you to vote yes, so we can continue that dialogue and answer that question.
Well, very good, very good. So we've got the signal, we have a couple minutes. So I think the important thing is that people understand that this is an important town meeting. There's some significant decisions to be made. Your votes are important here. This is the only time you get to vote on this and have a dialogue.
We have a new moderator, a new location.
Yeah, it's going to be a
very
good
exciting.
Good show.
Yep.
And some very interesting issues that are going to impact this for sure, well, this number 8 will definitely impact the future of the community. So if you have opinions, which many of you do, thankfully, we urge you to come to the special town meeting on November 3rd at 7 o'clock at the high school auditorium. So, and if you didn't hear the explanation of each of these articles, it's on the website under
The select board's select board page.
select board page under the newly formed design
Yeah, we got a brand new website.
So good. Stephen Crane, Town Manager, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me
giving
on.
us your
Always a
time
pleasure.
and explaining it to the audience. Thank you to those of you that have listened. And again, I urge you to attend the special town meeting on November 3rd. Thank you and good evening.